Hello, this is Phil Ahrens, and today I am going to read a creepypasta known as Red Mist, aka Squidward's Suicide. I'll be doing this for the months leading up to Halloween coming up. I thought I would do this, and I thought I would start out with one of the first creepypastas I've listened to uh, with lost episodes. Keep in mind that I am reading it, and for those who are writing them, please do not be offended. I'm a writer myself, and we all improve from time to time. Keep working on your craft and improve over time. And with that said, let's get started with the first story. I just want to start off by saying if you want an answer to at the end, prepare to be disappointed. There just isn't one. I was an intern at Nickelodeon Studios for a year in 2005 for my degree in animation. It wasn't paid, of course, most internships aren't, but it did have some perks beyond education. To adults, it might not seem like a big one, but to most kids at the time would go crazy over it. Now, since I work directly with the editors and animators, I got to view new episodes days before they were aired. I get right to it without giving too many unnecessary details. They had very recently made the SpongeBob movie, and the entire staff was somewhat sapped out of creativity. So it took them long enough to start up the season, but the delay lasts longer for upsetting reasons. There was a problem with the series 4 premiere set that set everyone back and everything back for several months. Me and two other interns were in the editing room along with the lead animator and sound editor for the final cut. We received the copy that was supposed to be Fear of a Krabby Patty and gathered around the screen to watch. Now, given that it isn't the final, yet animators often put a mock title card, sort of an inside joke for us, with phony, often-time lewd titles such as How Sex Doesn't Work instead of Rockabye Bib Valve when SpongeBob and Patrick adopts a sea scallop. Nothing particular funny, but work-related chuckles. So when we saw the title Squidward's Suicide, we didn't think it was more than a morbid joke. One of the interns did a small throat laugh at it. The happy-go-lucky played as normal. The story began with Squidward practicing on his clarinet, hitting a few sour notes like normal. We heard SpongeBob laughing outside, and Squidward stopped, yelled at him to keep it down, as he had a concert that night and needed to practice. SpongeBob said okay and go to see Sandling with Patrick. The bubble splash screen came up and we see the ending of Squidward's concert. This is when things began to seem off. While playing, a few frames repeat itself, but the sound doesn't. At this point, the sound is synced up with the animation, so yes, that's not common. But when he stopped playing, the sound finished as if the skip never happened. There is a slight murmur in the crowd before they begin to boo him. Not normal cartoon booing that is common in the show, but you could very clearly hear malice in it. Squidward in the full frame and looked visibly afraid. The shot goes to the crowd with SpongeBob in the center frame as he too is booing, very much unlike him. That isn't the oddest thing though. What is odd is everyone had hyper-realistic eyes, very detailed, clearly not shot of real people's eyes, but something more real than CGI. The pupils were red. Some of us looked at each other, obviously confused, but since we weren't the writers, we didn't question its appeal to children yet. The shot goes to Squidward sitting on the edge of his bed, looking very forlorn. When the view was out of his porthole window is of a night sky, so it isn't very long after the concert. The unsettling part is at this point there is no sound, literally no sound. Not even the feedback from the speakers in the room, as if the speakers were turned off, though their status showed they were working perfectly. He sat there blinking in silence for 30 seconds, then he started to sob softly, putting his tentacles over his eyes and crying quietly for a full minute. Over his eyes and cried for a full minute more. All the while a sound in the background, very slowly growing from nothing to barely audible. It sounded like a slight breeze through a forest. The screen slowly began to zoom in on his face. Zoom in on his face. By slow, I mean it's only noticeable for if you look at the shot 10 seconds apart side by side. His sobbing was getting louder, more full of hurt and anger. The screen then twitched a bit as if it twisted on itself for a split second, then back to normal. The wind through the trees sound gets slowly louder and more severe as if the storm is brewing somewhere. The eerie part is this sound and Squidward's sobbing sound real, as if the sound wasn't coming from the speakers, but as if the speakers were holes. The sounds were coming through from the other side. As good as the studio likes to have, they don't purchase the equipment to be that good to produce sound of that quality. Below the sound of the wind and sobbing, very faint, something sounded like laughing. It came at odd intervals and never lasts more than a second, so you had a hard time pinning it. We watched this twice, so pardon me if things sound too specific, but I have been thinking about them. After 30 seconds of this, the screen blurred and twitched violently, and something flashed over the screen of a single frame was replaced. The lead animation editor, paused and rewound the frame by frame. What he saw was horrible. It was a still photo of a dead child. He couldn't have been more than 6. The face was mangled and bloodied, one eye dangling over his upturned face, popped. He was naked down to his underwear, his stomach crudely cut open, and entrails lay beside him. He was laying on some pavement that was probably a road. The most upsetting part was that there was a shadow of the photographer. There was no crime tape, no evidence tag or markers, and the angle was completely off for a shot designed to be evidence. It would have seemed the photographer was the person responsible for the child's death. We were, of course, mortified, but pressed on, hoping it was all just a sick joke. The screen flipped back to Squidward, still sobbing louder than before, and half body and frame. There was now what appeared to be blood running down his face from his eyes. The blood was also done in hyper-realism style, looking as if you can touch it, you'll get blood on your fingers. The wind sound now as if it were the gale blows through the forest. There were snapping sounds of branches. The laughing, the deep baritones last at long intervals and came up to frequency. After about 20 seconds, the screen began to twist and showed a single frame photo. The editor was reluctant to go back. We all were, but he knew we had to. This time the photo of what appeared to be a little girl, no older than the first child. She was laying on her stomach, her barrettes in a pool of blood next to her. Her left eye was popped out and was too popped out, naked except for underpants. Her entrails were piled on top of her above another cruel cut of her back. Again, the body was on the streets and the photographer's shadow was visible, very similar in size and shape to the first. I had to choke back vomit, and one of the interns, the only female in the room, ran out. The show resumed. About 5 seconds after this second photo played, Squidward went silent, as did all sounds, like it was when the scene started. He put his tentacles down, and his eyes were now in hyper-realism like the others were in the beginning of this episode. They were bleeding, bloodshot, and pulsating. He just stared at the screen as if watching the viewers. After about 10 seconds. He started sobbing this time, not covering his eyes. The sound was piercing and loud, and most fears include all of his sobbings was mixed with screams. Tears and blood were dripping down his face at heavy rates. The wind sound came back and did the deep voice, and so did the deep voice laughter. And this time, the still photo lasts for about a good 5 frames. The animators was about to stop it on the floor and backed it up. This time, it was a photo of a boy about the same age, but this time the scene was different. The intros were just being pulled out from a stomach wound by a large hand. The right eye popped and dangled, blood trickling down the blood trickingly down it. The animator proceeded. It was hard to believe, but the next one was different. But we couldn't tell what. He went to the next same thing. He went back to the first and played them quicker, and I lost it. I vomited on the floor. The animating and sound editor gasped at the screen. The 5 frames were not as if they were 5 different photos. They were played out if they were frames from a video. We saw the hand slowly lift out the guts. We saw the kid's eyes focused on it. We even saw 2 frames of the kid beginning to blink. The lead sound editor told us to stop. We had to call in the creator to see this. Mr. Hillenberg arrived within 15 minutes. He was confused as to why he was called down there, so the editor just continued the episode. Once the few frames were shown, all screams, all sounds again stopped. Swivel was just staring at the viewer full frame of the face for about 3 seconds. The shot quickly panned out and a deep voice said, "Do it!" And we see Squidward's hands a shotgun. He immediately puts the gun in his mouth and pulls the trigger. Realistic blood and brain matter splatters the wall behind him and his bed. He flies back with the force. The last 5 seconds of this episode showed his body on the bed on his side, one eye dangling on what's left of his head above the floor, staring blankly at it. Then the episode ends. Mr. Hillenberg is obviously angry at this. He demanded to know what the heck was going on. Most people left the room at this point, so it was just a handful of us to watch it again. Viewing the episode twice only served to implant the entireties of it in my mind and causes me horrible nightmares. I'm sorry I stayed. The only theory we could think of was the files was edited by someone in the chain from the drawing studios to here. The CTO was called in to analyze when it happened. The analyst of the files did show it was edited over by new material. However, the timestamp of it was a mere 24 seconds before we began viewing it. All equipment involved was examined for foreign software and hardware as well as glitches, as if the timestamp may have glitched and showed the wrong time, but everything seemed to check out fine. We don't know what happened, and to this day nobody does. There was investigation due to the natures of the photos, but nothing came of it. No child scene was identified and no clues were gathered from the data involving nor physical clues in the folder. I never believed in the unexpected phenomenon before, but now I have something happen and I can't prove anything about it beyond anecdotal evidence. I think twice about things. I hoped everyone enjoyed the reading. Sorry for some of the stuttering and repeats. The website I was using had a lot of ads, and some of the ads did block some of the words that I was trying to read out of the file that I was working, or the story I was working on. I hope you all enjoy the story, and I hope you all have a good night wherever you are. Have a good one, everybody.